Now, a chain of pylons running 87 miles through the Lincolnshire wolds from Grimsby to Walpole in Norfolk. The 420 pylons would take renewable energy from the North Sea to the rest of the country. It would cost £2 billion and take years to complete. The plans have angered, as you know, many, including the County Council, which say there are better ways of moving the electricity than by using pylons.
Putting all 420 pylons 50 metres high across the east coast of Lincolnshire is a very serious matter, and we have already dismissed what we think is the better option of putting these cables on the seabed, as they have done from Scotland. And our view is, unless we're convinced they've gone through proper due process to actually agree that the cable shouldn't be on the seabed, we will actually look at legal action.
Well, the first stage of the consultation process is finished, but this isn't going to go away. On Friday, the leader of North East Lincolnshire Council, Philip Jackson, called on the National Grid to rethink its plans. He too wants the cables to be laid underground. Well, earlier I spoke to Stephen Knight-Gregson from the National Grid. Stephen, what do you say to those watching, and there are many, judging by my emails, who don't want to see 87 miles of cables and 420 pylons through the Lincolnshire countryside, in a nutshell?
Well, we're at a very early stage, and it's right that we bring our proposals to local communities, and we've been consulting for a couple of months now, and we'll be carefully considering all of the feedback that we've received from this first stage of consultation before we draw up more detailed proposals.
The leader of Lincolnshire County Council says it will be intrusive and impact on tourism and farming. You would go along with that and agree with him, would you?
Well, it's right that we consult early about our plans, and it's a requirement on us to show how feedback has shaped and influenced those proposals.
And the feedback you're getting is that people don't want it. I mean, I just read in the latest email I've got here from Richard, National Grid needs to wake up and smell the coffee. We're not in the 1970s. What do you think?
Well, as demand for electricity is set to double, and as we move toward more renewable sources of energy like offshore wind and solar, there's a need to upgrade the network.
I understand that, but are you saying you can't put the cables underground because it's going to cost 4 times as much?
Well, we look at when we're developing infrastructure like this, we do look at all of the different ways in which the reinforcement could be delivered, and we've set all of that out.
The leader of the council says you've dismissed seabed and underground cables. What do you say to that?
Well, we've explained how we have looked at underground cables, and we have looked at offshore options. And because the cost of infrastructure like this goes on to all of our electricity bills, government expects us to keep costs as low as possible, but also to have regard to how we can minimise impacts on the environment.
Can you understand that
carefully?
Yeah, can you understand if you live somewhere like Alford or Stickney or whatever, you're going to be very worried about your view, you're going to be very worried about the value of your property?
Well, we've set out our early thoughts about our proposals. We haven't fixed our plans as yet, so we will, over the months ahead, we will be looking very carefully at all of the feedback that we've received before we draw up more detailed proposals, and we'll be bringing those forward next year for another stage of consultation where we'll be inviting everybody's views again.
Yeah, these consultation things are very much in at the moment, but, you know, it's just a listening exercise. Nobody's going to take any real notice of it, are they?
Well, it's incumbent on us, and it's part of the framework that is set by government. But we've got to show how feedback has influenced and shaped our proposals. We will be doing that. Ultimately, it won't be National Grid deciding whether consent should be granted. It's a decision that ultimately has to be made by the Minister, the Secretary of State for Energy Security and Net Zero.
When we're likely to know? When is that likely to be? And do you think this will go ahead?
So we're a long way away, Peter, from even applying for consent. We're not expecting to apply for consent until probably early 2027. Okay. So we're not expecting a decision until, late 2028 at the very earliest.
A long time off, so I'm sure the people will carry on campaigning who are against. Steve, very good to have you on the programme tonight. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Yeah, just reading this from Anna, who wrote to me, Lincolnshire's east coast deserves better. Why are pylons being removed in other parts of the country and supplies put underground, but in Lincolnshire it's being put overground with pylons? A story we will continue to follow. Like your views on this, are you reassured by what you just heard there from the National Grid? Is it better to have pylons and keep bills down, or bury cables underground at 4 times the cost? So pylons, yes or no? Your views on this one. The email address is there, looknorth@bbc.co.uk. Follow me on Twitter, tweet me now, or text 81333. Start the text with the word Look North, and we will have some more at the end of the programme and tomorrow night. Now, on the subject of pylons, pro-pylons, Alan says the proposed new pylons are by far the most cost-effective method. Dean says people in Lincolnshire ought to think of the national interest. They'll be the first to complain if the lights start to go out. Anti-pylons, Anna says, we're not prepared to be fobbed off with this decision. We request that we have some independent surveys to establish the viability of offshore cables. And this one from Steve, who says, they say it is near impossible to lay them underground. But, Peter, in other places around the UK, they are removing the pylons and placing the cables in underground tunnels. We'll have some more of these, more on this story tomorrow night at 6:30, as usual. Thank you for watching. Have a nice evening. Take care. Bye. Now, plans to put up 420 pylons in Lincolnshire could pose a serious risk to the critical communications network used by the police. Well, that's according to Marc Jones, who is the Police and Crime Commissioner for Lincolnshire. But National Grid, that already manages over 4,000 miles of electric lines across the country, says it does so without interfering with existing emergency services operations. Well, Crispin Rolfe has this report.
A pylon proposal which almost everyone seems to be against. National Grid's aim to connect green energy in Grimsby to Norfolk using 87 miles of 50-metre high pylons right through the Lincolnshire countryside. But it's not just the visual impact, argues the county's Police and Crime Commissioner. Marc Jones claims the pylons also pose a serious risk to the emergency services critical communications network.
The advice I've had is that this could interfere significantly with the airwave radio system that all emergency services use across the county, and that's simply a risk that's not acceptable to me.
Where's that assessment come from?
Well, I take professional advice from the force here, and they obviously in turn take that from professionals nationally. So it is an assessment that's come to me from policing, but this affects all emergency services, not just policing.
Whether they're attractive or not is one thing, but Lincolnshire's no stranger to pylons. Take these north of Sleaford. They're part of 4,000 miles worth of overhead high voltage cable run by the National Grid, which says that it currently does so without impacting emergency services communications at the moment. And in countering what Marc Jones has to say, National Grid also says that any future projects would have to abide by similar regulations.
So, is it a worry?
It's something that must be taken into account when the decision makers are taking those decisions.
If the government want it, they'll do it.
I don't think we can make an informed decision if we don't know all the facts.
Of course, with local elections, including for the Police and Crime Commissioner due in May, this is a political issue, though Marc Jones insists that his concerns are purely operational.
If the police are telling me they're concerned, I will of course raise that. But fundamentally, this is about our community and making sure that they are looked after and are safe.
And can I just confirm who from Lincolnshire Police has said that they're concerned to you?
Well, that would be an internal matter.
Has that come from the Chief Constable?
It's an internal matter.
The Assistant Chief Constable?
We have a facilities department that is led professionally, and it's through them that we go for the advice.
But whatever the opinions or the science, with tourism at stake, the Lincolnshire authorities know what they want, and that's an undersea alternative to ensure that green energy doesn't detract from Lincolnshire's countryside. Crispin Rolfe, BBC Look North.
Yeah, the 420 pylon story, we were talking about it last night, of course, when I was talking to the National Grid about the plans. Now, they told me they will be looking carefully at all the feedback that they have received and stressed that the pylons are significantly cheaper than underground options, and any increased costs would be on the bill payers. Well, thanks for all the response. It's one of our most popular stories at the moment. Thanks for all the emails, texts and tweets last night. Just a few. Ray says, would they put 87 miles of electricity pylons across southern counties? I don't think so. Many people agreeing with Ray on the same sort of lines. And this second one is from Sarah. Personally, I'd rather have pylons than pay even more for my electricity. Thank you, Sarah. And just finally, Leslie says, cheapness is not a solution. Thank you for all of those. I did get a note from Helen, who's on a farm. She says, it looks like our family farm will be affected. Meanwhile, it'll affect those of us who have diversified into tourism. Overhead lines are noisy, substations are noisier still. Our visitors come for peace and quiet. Thank you, Helen, for that.